It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we're talking Glenn's performance in the 2014 indie drama Low Down.
Time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today, I am very excited to have on this show for the first time. We haven't done a podcast together in quite some time. He's a journalist at Next Best Picture and a member of the Las Vegas Film Critics Society. Welcome to the show, Daniel Howat.
Hello, hello. So glad to be back on a show with you, Kevin. It's been far too long, and glad I can finally make my debut on The World According to Glenn.
Yes, you finally arrived on this planet. Congrats. I hope you enjoy your stay.
Yes, yes.
Well, before we talk about Glenn in Low Down, I would love to get your origin story with Glenn, if you have any kind of relationship, what you love about her, what you don't. I don't know. I don't know what your
What
true
if I just
thoughts
came
on
up
Glenn.
and said she's the worst? I hate Glenn Close.
It would be a first, but I think people would be interested to listen.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And what is your favorite performance of hers?
Yes. So Kevin, I'm a man in my 30s. So, of course, my first introduction to Glenn Close was Cruella de Vil. So,
Yes.
of course, that was my first introduction. And I really do. I have such vivid memories of those movies. I have vivid memories of watching. It was probably the first 101 Dalmatians, watching those with my older siblings and being actually a little bit scared. Like, being like, this is kind of freaking me out because she's so good in those movies.
A little too good.
It really sticks with you. She's genuinely scary, especially, for a kid. And, so this just undeniably singular. I'm sure that's the most popular answer that you're getting as far as the introduction to Glenn. Because, I mean, what better introduction would there be? I was also thinking about, like, how I'm sure she wasn't thinking of it in these terms when she signed on for that role, but, like, what a great introduction, what a great role to take on that introduces an entire generation to you as a performer and sticks with people. Because of course I saw that before any other Glenn performances. I was trying to think of like what my first introduction to Glenn Close was like in terms of her grown-up performances. It must have been like Air Force One, probably. It was probably a film that my dad had on a lot. I don't like have
Same
a
era.
memory. Exactly, the same era. I don't have a memory of like discovering Glenn Close in that movie or realizing that was Cruella de Vil, or I don't have those memories. I do remember when I first really connected the dots on who Glenn was as a performer when I was like, in high school and finally doing my own film education, discovering all these movies and watching, Dangerous Liaisons and Fatal Attraction and going, oh, this is an actress right here. Okay.
I get it now. Right.
Exactly. So, I mean, so if I was to pick a favorite, I mean, my heart still says Cruella de Vil because it just is imprinted on me as a child.
You never forget your first.
You're right, exactly. Exactly. But I do think there's something about Fatal Attraction, honestly, in a similar realm as Cruella, right? She just captures this, villainous performance, this element of crazy that really sticks with you. And so I think her in Fatal Attraction, it's also just an influential performance.
Oh, yeah.
I remember seeing The Housemaid last year. Not a movie I recommend, but I remember so specifically thinking that Amanda Seyfried, I think, owes a lot to Glenn's performance in Fatal Attraction and so many others throughout the years. I think her performance is still influencing people today. So I think that's
Right.
I think that's got to be my favorite for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also think, too, probably what you're saying a little bit is that she also manages to, even though she does have the crazy part of it, of Alex Forrest, there's also a humanity there,
Yes.
too, that kind of resonates at the same time. Even if you might not like her by any means, you still kind of understand where she's coming from to a certain extent.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's
And
even true. I mean, okay, it feels silly saying this, but I think it's true to Cruella to a degree. Like, I
sure,
think she's obviously cartoonish and larger than life, of course. But I do think there's a believability there that
right.
you really do believe this woman would be wanting to murder all those dogs, and that's what made it so
Hmm.
scary as a kid, So.
Yeah.
I think she's able to bring so many layers, no matter how big the role might be, or, as is the case with the movie we're going to talk about today, how
Hmm.
small, subdued it may be. So,
How
yeah,
low down it is, perhaps we could say.
exactly.
Yes. Well, before we get into our main topic today, I did just want to check in and talk about Glenn getting an honorary Oscar
Yes.
because this is the biggest news story of 2026 as far as I'm concerned. And so, did you have any thoughts when you heard that announcement? Was it like, yes, finally? Or is it like, maybe she should have waited to get a competitive one? Because people have all kinds of weird feelings about honorary Oscars.
That's the thing. I was a little surprised at how strong my feelings were when I heard the announcement, really having
Hmm.
nothing to do with Glenn, I will say. I
Okay.
feel like there's a new trend in the Academy Honorary Awards that I don't know what it is. Some feelings just boil up in me, a little bit of frustration
Hmm.
of I feel like they've started awarding people like Tom Cruise is the most egregious example of just awarding somebody only because they're popular. Yes, they've contributed to cinema, but awarding popular actors who may still have a competitive Oscar in them, as opposed to maybe people who are lesser known, who have contributed in huge ways to cinema, but might be lesser known names. So I did feel that way, not through any fault of Glenn. Like she's obviously iconic. I do realize I might be wading into enemy territory with this opinion here, but
Yes. Tread
but
carefully.
but I did feel like maybe she has a competitive Oscar in her. I understand she's getting up there, so
79.
odds are not in her favor, but it's still possible. So that is part of it. But even with Ridley Scott, the same thing. It's they're still so active, they're still so popular that it feels like aren't there less popular actors who might benefit more from an honorary award? So I don't know. That's what I was feeling. I felt that way with Tom Cruise. I felt that way with Angela Bassett. I'm trying to think if there were other better examples, but those four were the examples that sort of made me have this frustration with the Academy Honorary Awards lately. I
Yeah.
don't know. Does that like
No,
resonate at all?
of course. Yes, I totally understand that. Just taking my stand card out of it, just objectively speaking, there is that trend lately, although it has happened in the past, like we have with Paul Newman getting one when he was still quite active before he won a competitive one. Same with Spike Lee.
Yeah.
So it's not entirely new, but
I
it's
guess that's true. I guess that's a fair counter
yeah,
argument. It really, Steve Martin.
yeah.
It does happen, I suppose. I guess I'm
Hmm.
less frustrated when it's somebody who like Jackie Chan. Yes, popular.
Yes.
He's never going to win an Oscar, so it's like, of course, give him the honorary. I think that makes sense. Or even
Right.
Steve Martin to the same degree.
Maybe. Hmm.
But when it's Angela Bassett, Tom Cruise, Glenn Close, I guess Ridley Scott, it kind of feels like they might still have a competitive one in them.
Yeah, we'll see.
But I am glad. I'm glad for Glenn Close. I'm glad,
Yes.
obviously, one of the most nominated people without a win. So I'm glad that she will have a statuette. She will, is has an Oscar, even if it's not competitive.
Yes. Much like Diane Warren. Sorry,
Exactly.
that was so rude, but it's just,
Factual.
at a certain
Factual.
point, it's going to be, like I said on, I think, a few episodes ago, it's going to be very surreal to see Glenn holding an actual Oscar statuette.
100%. 100%.
And will I make it my phone background? Perhaps. Perhaps. But regardless, we are now here to talk about one of the many roles that I'm sure contributed to Glenn getting an honorary Oscar.
Yes, one of the primary ones, if I had to say.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's cited right in the press release.
Yes.
not really. But Low Down. Okay, so this is 2014. We're still in 2014. We covered Guardians of the Galaxy last week, and this is her other 2014 movie. Based on the true story of a jazz pianist, Joe Albany, and his fraught relationship with his daughter, Amy Jo Albany. So, for a background on this movie, Amy was working craft services for the director Jeff Price, and they got to chatting, and he was surprised to learn about her father having been a fan of his music for a long time and that whole jazz world. So, they talked about various figures she knew growing up, which led to Jeff feeling like there might be a good story here that could be adapted to film. So Amy ended up writing a memoir called Low Down, Junk, Jazz, and Other Fairy Tales from Childhood in 2003, which was the basis for this film. It went through development for a decade or so before it finally just came back around to Jeff Price, who had only directed music videos before this for artists like Mariah Carey and the B-52s and REM, but he had also done some cinematography work, including on Let's Get Lost, the Oscar-nominated documentary about Chet Baker. So Mark Ruffalo had been initially cast to play Joe, but he had to drop out, and he was replaced by John Hawkes, having just come off an acclaimed role in The Sessions, and Elle Fanning was cast for Amy, and then Glenn was cast for the role of Graham, Joe's mother and Amy's grandmother, who provides a bit of a stabilizing force in Amy's life while Joe goes through hard times. So there wasn't a lot of stuff I could find in terms of like interviews and press material on this, believe it or not. But I did find one quote from Glenn talking to Entertainment Weekly about what attracted her to this role. She said, "It was great because I tried to channel Graham through Amy's writing and also just talking to her, what she wore, what she had on her feet, what was her physicality, what was her hair like, the whole atmosphere of that character." And noted that for Amy, Graham was the only woman that Amy ever loved. So all of that was helpful for her to get into the bones of who this woman was. So Low Down is an indie drama that depicts Amy as a teenager growing up with Joe in New York City, where he works as a jazz pianist. Her mother, played by Lena Headey, is largely out of the picture and spends most of her time getting drunk, while Joe is struggling with heroin addiction. So he's been in and out of prison and ends up violating his parole, which leads to him going back to prison. So Amy is forced to live with her grandmother, played by Glenn, of course. She goes by Graham, and she's this kind of tough but fair older woman who's concerned about her son's battling of his demons and hopes to raise Amy right. Joe is eventually released from prison, but struggles to adapt back into society again and abruptly leaves for Europe, forcing Amy to go live with her Graham again. So we see most of this through Amy's eyes as she struggles to kind of find some kind of normalcy in her life. So that's the gist. There's more to discuss with other subplots as well, such as young Caleb Landry Jones here as Amy's boyfriend and Peter Dinklage as her neighbor, But before we get into all that, Daniel, I know you have not seen Low Down before this. I didn't know many people who actually had, to be fair, but I am curious what your thoughts were, if you'd even heard of it, if you knew it existed, and what your thoughts were on Glenn's performance.
Yeah, I had never heard of Low Down when you messaged me. You described it as a movie that doesn't exist. I think you are completely right.
Okay. Yep.
It's not even a this had Oscar buzz sort of title. It's like this just
Yeah.
didn't have buzz. This just didn't really make any impact. I'd be
Yeah.
curious if we are the first podcast to ever discuss this film. We very well
Wow.
could be.
Breaking new ground.
Yeah, exactly.
12 years later.
What I do appreciate though is, I had never, like I said, had never heard of this film, and so I came at it really. I just kind of did the basics. I read the plot description, and then that was pretty much it. Looked at the cast before
Did
watching
it
it.
sound interesting to you, at least?
Well, it sounded, what sounded interesting to me is we're in like a new era of film now where music biopic has become its own genre. And
Yeah.
that wasn't true back in 2014, not as true in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was curious to see what this would be, especially something small scale with a musician I had never heard of. And I do appreciate that it is not conforming to any of the music biopic cliches. It is, for better or worse, it's
Mm-hmm.
because we don't, his music isn't as familiar, of course, so it's not like it's playing to the hits by any means. So it definitely feels more grounded when it comes to a biopic about an artist. The other thing that caught my eye after watching was when the credits rolled, I didn't realize until then that Amy had co-written this film herself. So that
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that clicked a lot of things into place, discovering that after watching it, realizing, oh, that makes so much sense that the main character was one of the authors because, or one of the screenwriters, because the material feels too close. So much of this film is presented as things that happen, and those things are interesting. Obviously, her childhood is tragic and sad, and she's witnessing things that she shouldn't witness. She's also witnessing things that are really interesting, being this close to somebody who's so connected in the jazz world. It just doesn't all really coalesce to much of anything. It's things that happen without connecting to a compelling point or idea or theme. It's just look at this childhood. And so
Mm-hmm.
that it makes a lot of sense that she wrote it just being a little bit too close to not too close. She is the material. So
Right.
that I think is the biggest issue with this movie. There are things that this movie does well. There are things that this movie there are moments that are compelling more than the film as a whole being compelling.
Was Glenn one of the more compelling moments for you here?
I think so. I think her performance is good.
Yeah.
I think, there's, jumping around a little bit. I mean, when Joe goes to Europe and Amy Jo is living with Graham at that point, there's kind of I think it's right after the 2 years later time card. There's kind of a burst of energy in the movie. It becomes livelier because she's in a much more stable place, stable, happy, being away from her father. And so that section of the film really, really did start to take off. I was like, okay, we're doing something now. It didn't really last necessarily, but
Right.
Glenn's performance as Graham, I think she's a stabilizing force, both comforting to Amy Jo, but also forceful, opposing her son. That scene of like slapping him and them getting into like a fight, him threatening to kill her is definitely there was some fight, some fire there that I appreciated in her performance. What about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I'll just say I had only really heard of this in the context of like this being in the sort of fallow period between Damages and the wife. Like
Yeah.
it's a big long gap, really. I will say I did get it mixed up with Get Low, that
Yeah.
movie
Yeah, I
with
had the
Robert
exact same
Duvall.
thought. I had the exact
Oh
same
my
thought.
god, that's so funny. That one at least briefly had some Oscar buzz, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah.
But
Wait, wasn't he
yeah,
nominated? Or it wasn't Robert Duvall nominated for
an
Get Low?
Oscar? No, no,
Wow. Wait,
no.
I totally made that up in my brain. Wow.
It's okay. We come up with all kinds of scenarios on this show. But, and I hadn't heard of Joe Albany like
Yeah.
you. Didn't really know much going in. Didn't even know the extent of Glenn's role. Was she just going to be a cameo? Would we have a lot to talk about here? I had no idea. So I was pleasantly surprised that she did seem to have like a real character here and
Yeah.
was given pretty solid material. It's not the most original character in the world. She is playing the tough but warm grandmother who has a kind of plucky spirit, and she does provide that stability. But I think she, fills it in quite nicely with some of her choices and makes it seem like a full-fledged human and not just an extension of Amy. I did, unfortunately, while watching this, think about Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, I had the exact same thought too. I was like, this is the
Oh,
prototype role here.
yeah.
Which movie's
um,
better, which movie's worse? I don't know. But
we'll talk
there's
about it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, decidedly having more makeup in the latter,
Yeah.
but here it looks a little more natural, I would say.
Yeah.
But still subtly transforming with her hair and even like I think her weight, just the way she carries herself is quite different. She has the heaviness of an older woman, I think, who's had to, literally shoulder a lot in her life, not just physically but emotionally. And so I think it is a very successful performance. The film itself, I can take or leave.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I feel like this was obviously a very personal project for Amy Jo Albany. And Jeff Price, too, probably had a big attachment to it as well, with the whole fondness of this 70s era of jazz. and those kind of, hardworking guys in New York who kind of just were like in it for the love of the game sort of thing, but also lived really hard lives. I get the appeal of all of that, and I think the performances do a lot to elevate this, but I don't know how overall successful the film is of selling its vision or in execution. I kind of think the character of Amy is surprisingly passive when you watch it. Like, it's really kind of tough to get a bit of an emotional attachment to her personally, which is odd being that it's co-written by Amy herself. But I don't know, it just seems like it's, how there's sometimes those situations where a filmmaker is so passionate about their subject and then they can kind of assume that the viewer feels that same kind of passion in a way, and so there's like shortcuts being taken at times to, I don't know, it's like it's a little bit of how I felt watching Maestro, for example, with like how much Bradley Cooper just adored Leonard Bernstein and all that, and didn't really always fill in the gaps in connective tissue with certain things because he just kind of assumed that other people might have that same love. That's kind of
Yeah,
how I was feeling watching this.
completely. I mean, that's the thing. Amy Jo as a character is just observing most of what's happening as opposed to like you said she's very passive. She doesn't have an active role in most of what's going on.
Yeah.
Towards the, latter half of the movie where she has her boyfriend and things, there's a little bit more action on her part, but even so, it's mostly just observing what's happening in her life. Which,
Yeah.
frankly, I mean, I don't know. I didn't look at any interviews from Amy Jo Albany. I don't know how she feels about the film or how successful it was or wasn't. But I would guess it probably feels very true to her because
Right.
our own lives, that's what we're doing. I mean, we don't think of our lives as heading towards some compelling narrative or compelling theme. Like
Hmm.
we are moving through life, and that's the difference between life and narrative, life and story. And
Right.
so it probably is very accurate to how she felt in her life, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's a compelling narrative by any means. So yeah, it
Right.
was frustrating.
Right. It's like there's that emotional attachment that she probably has because she's just kind of almost seeing her own life being recreated in this way. But I don't know if the film really sells exactly what the emotional journey is for her
Yeah.
to other people. So
Yeah,
I
and
think that's
it's
yeah.
so strange because I'm such a sucker for coming of age stories. I mean, that really is a genre that I love so much. So many of my favorite films are coming of age stories,
Yeah.
but again, without that, I don't even fully know what she as a character wants, other than stability. She does love her dad. So there's an element of sadness of watching her dad not be there and always be making the wrong
Hmm.
choices. But yeah, there's not that coming of age element that says, here's where she started, here's where she's going. It's just kind of, here's the sad things that happened to me?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually to that point, I find that it is quite dour as a film. Like
Yeah.
there's not a lot of fun and spontaneity here that I also think like, I feel like the fun and spontaneity is sort of like key to jazz as an art form as well, if they want to
Yeah.
reflect that. And I just can't say that like I get much appeal of like what makes jazz so addictive for these guys from
Yeah.
this,
Yeah, I
you
didn't.
know.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because I think Price captures the era really well. I mean, I say that like I was there,
Yes.
but he captures that feeling really well. I think
Hmm.
this is very well shot. I think it looks
Yep.
really good. I think it captures that grimy, pale yellow texture really, really
Yeah.
well. And so, again, contributing to, I bet this feels really authentic because
Hmm.
the production design, all the locations that they're in, the craft, I think, is really there, but it doesn't communicate to us why this was such an addictive time for him, why this was, we just don't get any
Hmm.
of those elements, despite how nice it looks or,
Right.
accurate it might look.
Right. Yeah. It's just for me the kind of nonstop trauma thing is not great. Like you would think that just based on watching her that like her entire childhood was just nonstop trauma, really.
Which maybe it
When
was, but it's
yeah,
not an
but
enjoyable experience to watch.
yeah, and I don't know. I just think the film could have used a few more moments of connection in a more positive way to sort of balance out the harshness and make that seem all the more impactful.
That's why
And
there's that burst of energy when she's
yeah,
living with Glenn, because it does seem like,
right.
oh, her life is getting better, and
Hmm.
then of course that quickly changes.
Right. So then I feel like I'm sort of left wondering what the intention was of the film by the end. I mean, like you said, the production design is very believably 70s, the whole atmosphere, that all tracks, and it is relatively immersive, I would say. But yeah, on the script level and probably on a direction level too, I think there's a bit to be desired,
For sure.
sadly.
And that's not to say that the sad moments or traumatic moments aren't effective in that way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There are the
Yeah.
moments where like Taryn Manning's character overdoses. Like that's a really impactful scene. That's hard
Yeah.
to see. I don't remember the her child's name, but kind of realizing that, oh, that this child's going to get taken away, even though we love them. And
Right.
so those moments are really sad. Another sad one was when they're told not to go back to their apartment because, some bad shit's going on, and they have to just go sit in the park until the evening.
Yeah.
That's such a small moment. There's so many more traumatic moments, but that one really just made me so sad. Maybe it's as a dad, just not taking care of your kid, but
Mm-hmm.
seeing her having to do her homework in the park and like begging her dad, "Can we please go back now?" That I don't know why, but that scene specifically like stuck
Yeah.
out to me as just particularly tragic.
Right. Well, it is those more, specific moments that I think is what makes certain coming of age films feel universal despite them being specific in
Yeah.
that way, I think. I also think a lot to do with the Lena Headey stuff is quite brutal to watch,
Yeah.
as her distant mother. To Lena Headey's credit, she does have that kind of like messy, sort of almost devilish quality at times where she just is like this kind of toxic cloud of a person for Amy, and just kind of seeing how sort of mercurial she can be and how she comes back into their life and seems to be like wanting to get something started again, but then she just ends up stealing money, I think, at one point from his wallet and just leaving in the middle of the night. It's just it's brutal because it seems like both of her parents treat her with a maturity that she probably likes, but they're also totally consumed by their own stuff they got going on and their need to survive and their own passions, even, that feels like they don't spare much attention for her. And I do think, to Elle's credit, you feel some of the isolation that Amy is feeling in those moments where she just kind of has those faraway stares as these moments are happening. Those are
Yeah.
the quiet moments I find special in this film.
Completely. I think to that end, it also the other piece that you're missing that you typically see in coming of age movies is the life apart from the trauma. You never
Yeah.
really see other than again when she's got her boyfriend kind of. But like throughout her younger years, you don't see any of that. You get those moments where she like has that strange, I don't even know what you want to call it, that moment that she has with Peter Dinklage. There are those sorts of moments where
Yeah.
she's like kind of experiencing life, like being treated as an adult, kind of in those
Mm-hmm.
moments. But you never really see her apart from this, initially that apartment building, and then apart from her father. It's just that is her whole life. And again, maybe that was true to life. Maybe that's what Amy Jo's life felt like. But it just isn't,
Mm.
it doesn't feel like a complete person. We only seeing
Yeah.
this one side of her. But I will say, Elle's performance, I think is quite good for what she's given.
Mm-hmm.
I believe she was 16 when she made this, and
Yep.
you can already see, the depth that she has in her, the naturalism. I think she really plays this quite naturally. She never overplays or oversells any of the trauma that she's experiencing. It all feels very believable in her hands. So I think she
Yep.
does a phenomenal job. Honestly, I don't have any performances that didn't work for me. I think the cast as a whole, for what they're given, do a fine job.
I think so. And I also think this is kind of minor, but Elle Fanning for me really does translate so well as someone of the past.
Yeah, I
I will
agree.
say,
Yeah.
she's not one of those actors who have the iPhone face kind of
Yes.
thing that people say. There's something about her. I don't know. There's just kind of from another time that is kind of intangible that you can't really point your finger at like exactly what it is, but yeah, it's like this and 20th century women, which is kind of around the same time period that, yeah, it works and you buy into it.
Same with John Hawkes, frankly.
Definitely John
I'd be
Hawkes.
curious
Yeah.
to see, what Mark Ruffalo would have done in the role. I obviously think Mark
Mm,
Ruffalo is a phenomenal actor, but I do think there's something so authentic about John Hawkes in every role that he
yeah.
plays because he kind of doesn't. He does look very much like Joe Albany. Again, somebody I wasn't familiar with, but they do look very much alike. But he doesn't really look like anybody today either. He just
No.
looks
Yeah.
like John Hawkes, and so he's able to kind
Yeah.
of disappear into a role, whatever the role may be.
Yeah. I feel like you need a bit of a character actor type in this role, honestly. I don't know how I would classify Mark Ruffalo at this point. He's kind of like lead supporting character actor
Yeah.
all at once at times, but yeah, someone like John Hawkes, especially at this point in his career, makes a lot of sense for this. You mentioned Peter Dinklage. I do want to talk about this part because I was a little puzzled, frankly, by what we were trying to accomplish here.
Same.
um, yeah, he's playing like her neighbor, I think, who is befriending her, and she ends up kissing him at one point after he takes her to his room, which I can't say I fully understood, but
I don't either. He's like living there, but he's not supposed to because he's like literally living in the walls.
yeah.
uh, and then or wherever that was. And then yeah, I didn't know how to feel about her kissing him. It felt really
Hmm.
icky. I was like, she did it to him. I was it was a very strange moment all around.
Yeah.
It very much felt like Amy trying to be an adult. She's witnessing all
Mm,
these adult
yeah.
things, all these things that
Sure.
are older than she should be. So I do understand the impulse that might have come over Amy to like treat herself or view herself as an adult. But at that time, how old was her character at that moment? I don't even know if she was a teenager at that point. I was losing track of how old she was supposed to be. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was very very strange, very uncomfortable. And
I would
then
say probably still too young to be doing all that, but
yes, yes. And then followed shortly by him in this art exhibition. I don't know what you want to call that.
mm,
Whatever they were doing, painting him completely
yes.
blue. That was an experience
And
for sure.
also kind of erotic at the
Yeah,
same time. Yeah.
no clue what was going
That
on.
whole sequence where she's like spying on him through the window and watching him painted all blue and doing these weird sort of acts kind of freaks her out, so she smashes the window glass. It's like I don't know how much this part feels developed in a very coherent way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think those are the moments that should be more developed because those are the moments of her
Right.
figuring life out, like doing her own thing, even if it's something strange. But
Hmm.
again, it goes back to I don't know what she wanted other than curiosity or to treat herself like a grown up. I
Hmm.
just didn't know what she wanted other than observation, spying on him again and getting these glimpses into a life that she shouldn't be seeing at that age.
Well, to circle back to Glenn, our main topic, of course, I do think she has a series of good scenes here, kind of in the middle of when Joe is arrested for, I think he has like possession of something. I think it's might just be pot, honestly, but she witnesses all this, and all this leads to her having to call up her grandmother, which is where Glenn comes in, and we see her opening up her home. She gives her a book about Dylan Thomas and says like she wants her to be a writer like Dylan Thomas. I love how you get a sense of exactly like what kind of person she is for me, like down to the physicality too, like her kind of hunched back and her cigarette and her outfit and the glasses. But there's just like a more of a parental vibe right away that you notice, like right off the bat, in the way that she treats him, treats her compared to how Joe treats her. And there's the scene of at the prison as well, right after that, in the visitor's room, where Graham is kind of like chiding her son for only having 6 months left on her parole, but getting pinched for having drugs on him. And I love how kind of stern, but clearly coming from a place of love that she is with him. And there's this feeling I get that like she has tried and tried for years now, probably, to get him to clean his act up. And yet he still keeps getting in his own way. And it's like, if he can't make the effort to try, then there's only so much I can do. there's that kind of resigned feeling that I think is something that I really responded to.
Yeah, and I think they balanced it out. I was afraid at first that she would be too much of the cliche, kind
Yeah.
grandma role, but they do balance it out with the more intense way she sort of stands up to her son. And like I said earlier,
Hmm.
the scene where they're like slapping each other, and I don't know if she threatens to kill Joe, but he threatens to kill her, and but
Yeah.
she's just standing her ground. And I do think those moments humanize her a bit more and show that no, she is actually standing up to her son, even though she loves him and she knows he's not going to actually hurt her, and so she's
Right.
able to take that step. So I think that those were good moments for Glenn to go through.
Hmm. Yeah, there's another scene after he gets out of prison again, and as he gets home, he immediately wants to just go out again
Yeah.
and like probably get into trouble, which clearly bothers her. And we get this, I think, key exchange of dialogue that I took note of, where she's like, "Don't you ever get tired of lying?" And he says like that, you're no saint yourself. And she's like, "No, I'm not a saint, but I suffer like a saint with you as a son, with you for a son." And then it's just like, why don't you just kill me? Put me out of my misery. There's a knife on the table. Do me a big favor. Which again feels so specific. That sort of like almost melodrama of that. It almost reminded me of like The Sopranos with, I don't know if you've seen that, but with Tony Soprano's mother is who's always just being
Yep.
like, just I wish the good Lord would take me now kind of situation. That it rings true. I'll say that as well from personal experience as well. But yeah, really grounding the film nicely, I think, in a sense that I think the rest of the film is lacking at times overall.
Yeah, I think it's because all the other characters are more fleshed out than Amy is. You
Yeah.
you get those moments with Graham, you get those moments with Joe, and you don't have those personal moments to know how she's feeling other than bad.
Yeah.
Of course she doesn't enjoy her childhood, and she wants her father with her. She does love her father and wants her father to be the man he should be. So we
Yeah.
get all that, but there's nothing past that. And so it just makes her
Right.
feel hollow, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there are moments here and there that I think I did respond to a little more of like when Joe eventually gets restless and says he can't get people in this city to really care about the music that he cares about. So he wants to go to Europe and start over there. And so he says he has to leave and be there for a while, and he doesn't want her to go with him, doesn't want Amy to go with him. And that part I do find quite moving, that whole scene of just where she is just watching her father slip away and kind of abandon her in a sense. I think that's pretty heavy. And John Hawkes is great in that scene too. The way he just, he's just like, I want you to say something, to either like get her to say something to make him want to stay or like to give her blessing maybe or something. But I feel like they both kind of have that unspoken thing between them of acknowledging how difficult this situation is for him in particular, and they're both kind of just like quietly reckoning with that, even though it's clearly the elephant in the room of the heroin addiction.
Hmm. And then you feel that freedom that she feels after the time jump, that
Yeah.
no matter how much they wanted to stay together, or at least how much they do care for each other, maybe they were better off separate. And
Yeah.
how when he comes back, everything just kind of starts to sink back into where it was. And the tragedy of that is, I think that's like I know I've already mentioned like three times. That's definitely the strongest portion of the film, because you have
Yeah.
that energy counterbalanced with the sadness that he brings back into their lives. Even though I do appreciate a good Caleb Landry Jones sighting, even if I have to watch that hair. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. We can talk a little bit more about that because we have this really interesting sort of sequence of this dinner at Graham's house, which is with Amy's new boyfriend, played by Caleb Landry Jones. Also, Flea is in this movie.
Yeah.
Didn't mention that earlier, but of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's also a producer on the film, so good for him.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're talking about like Caleb Landry Jones has this new medication called Klonopin for his epilepsy, and Amy's revealing that Graham has been like trying to get him to try this natural Eastern medicine kind of thing, like this martial art healing. And there's something about the way she said the Chinese have been studying the human body for centuries that cracked me up a little bit. It's just a little bit of that classic sort of grandmotherly wisdom that she's doling out there. That's sort of like, hey, take it or leave it. But like, I think there's some real value in this, what the Chinese have been doing. That's like so specific that I love.
For sure. For sure. This was
Yeah.
this was sort of right before Caleb Landry Jones hit like the
Hmm.
peak of his career, it would seem.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so it was interesting to see him, bringing all of his. I think he fits right into this era so well. He feels like
Oh
he
yeah.
so from the 70s, full of sort of the jitteriness and interior movement that
Hmm.
makes up. So I think he really is a great performer here. Even though it was an interesting and tragic juxtaposition of his relationship with Amy and then seeing how that affects Joe when he returns is very fascinating.
Yeah. And I think there even is a bit of a unspoken draw, I think, that Amy has towards him
Yeah.
because of her relationship with her father and maybe wanting to have someone to kind of take care of in a sense.
Yeah.
That I think, the film never really underlines any of that, but
Yeah.
I think that is a little bit implied. At least that's what I was bringing to it.
Oh, for sure.
But I think Glenn also has a really sweet moment with her son where she is telling him that, like, when he plays his music, she feels that he's been touched by God, which I think is a nice kind of vulnerable moment for me that kind of deepens the performance too, because it's like she sees the potential in him and she knows he's brilliant, but again, he keeps getting in his own way. And that just is what makes it so difficult for her, because it's like she still loves him so much, but he keeps screwing up.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that the film gives us I'm not sure they don't give us very many glimpses into his genius, but I did think it was impressive to see John Hawkes' piano skills. I think he sold
Yeah.
that very strongly, and it did really help us understand, how admired he was at that time.
Hmm.
So I wish we had seen some more of that, not from a music biopic standpoint of just give us all the music, but I don't think
Right.
they showed us enough of him as a performer to help us understand his place in the art scene enough. We really just see more of him as the drug addict and the deadbeat dad more than
Yeah.
the great jazz performer that he was.
Hmm. Yeah, honestly, to the point where it doesn't really even have to be about Joe Albany
Yeah,
specifically,
yeah,
I would argue, because it is so vague about all of that stuff that I'm just like, you could have just made it a fictional guy from the 70s, a Llewyn Davis, if
yeah.
you will.
Yeah,
you know?
I did think about Llewyn Davis a few times because this came out right
Yeah.
after Llewyn Davis, so I'm
Hmm.
sure they were produced at the same time, and of course, very different stories, but so many similarities between them, and obviously that
Hmm.
is a much superior film.
I would
Um,
say so.
yeah, in the way that it
And
tackles
utilizes music quite a bit better. Yeah.
so much better, and
Yeah.
not tackling drug addiction really, but still tackling that the relationship between an artist and society and those sorts of
Yeah.
things. So it's interesting the timing of the two films.
Hmm. To circle back to your point about the big slap scene, that I wanted to talk about my thoughts on that as well, because that was quite impactful, I must say, watching it. Because it's like, Joe has started shooting up again, and he returns home to find Amy kind of inconsolable because there's just been this incident in public with her boyfriend having a epilepsy episode, and he's had to be taken to the psychiatric evaluation, and she's just such a mess, and Graham is trying to take care of her, and he's just like, I don't want to handle any of this. I don't even really care. And so Graham just slaps him so hard. I actually made like an audible noise watching it. It's like, oh God. Like, it's like a double slap too. It's like, damn, okay. He just says he needed some peace, and she's just like, this is what you need, is a slap in the face, essentially. And it made me realize too, we don't have nearly enough Glenn slapping moments in her filmography, I must say. Because I was like, that woman knows how to slap.
100%. And John Hawkes knows how to
Just saying.
take one as well.
Yeah. But after that, she's kind of, still seeking some sort of stability, Amy. And the scene where she goes and sees her mother is so brutal because she's once again drunk off her ass and is just insulting her over and over about how like she's a slut and she's slipping academically and these things that her father has clearly relayed to her. And to be honest, watching this scene is just like, it felt like this is just turning into misery porn, honestly.
100%.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just over and over, just Amy taking these like brutal insults from her. And then even Amy wanting to help score some drugs for her father to kind of ease his pain. Because I think at that point he's kind of detoxing and going through a lot there. I mean, it is really bleak. She even tastes some of it at one point, and I was like, my goodness, this is a lot.
Yeah, I do think it sinks too far into the misery of it
Yeah.
all, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and never really comes out of that. And
Yeah.
so it left me so it's not even that it's so tragic that it like leaves you wrecked. It just left me frustrated and
Yeah.
kind of like, yeah, I get it. It kind of at a certain point it becomes boring just seeing the same thing because it's kind of one
I agree.
note. It's tragic, and I believe that those things happened, and that's horrifying.
Yeah.
But it's just not compelling, and it just keeps happening over and over and over in this film.
Right. And obviously, it is important to divorce those two things as well. Like you kind of said, that those things were clearly quite tragic for Amy growing up,
Yeah.
but it's not really translated in a way that is dramatically effective, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
By the time we get to the end, it's like
I get
kind
it.
of peters out,
Yeah. Yep.
ultimately. And
Yeah.
so, we get title cards by the end of saying how he continued touring and recording until his death in 1988 at the age of 63, and how Amy's now living in Los Angeles with her husband and two children, which is nice. I just like, I don't know if by the end of the film I really feel any kind of way about these people or would like translate any of this all that much to my own life in a sense. Not that any film has to do that, but it's just there's something missing here,
Yeah,
you know.
it does just sort of end.
Yeah.
And I guess I sort of expected it to end with his death or
Mm-hmm.
something. But yeah, it kind of ends a while before his death. It's not even that close to his
Yeah.
death. There's a lot more story here. So I was kind of confused as to how that became the ending point, like
Yeah.
why did you end the story then? I guess just ending it before she truly became an adult, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was that was a little bit confounding to me.
Yeah. I sort of understand just that this is a snapshot of her growing up as a teenager in this environment, and that's what the story is, and that's it. But
Sure.
I thought there would be more, to quote Patricia Arquette,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And, there's some things that the director has said about wanting to make the film feel like a jazz kind of like improvisational thing, like with the stuff with the Peter Dinklage and like all the different storylines we have going on here. I just think there's such a fine line between that and just kind of being messy,
Yeah,
ultimately.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I feel this sadly slipped into.
I am no expert on jazz, so forgive me if I
Mm.
sound stupid in my
You're
in my
no Ryan
comparing it.
Gosling
Uh,
in La La Land. Got
no,
it.
as much as I've tried to save jazz, I haven't quite gotten there. But
Okay.
it feels like jazz, yes, is improvisational, but it's within a structure. And
Yes.
this doesn't really feel this feels it doesn't feel improvisational. Like I'm not even sure that I could couch that, but I guess these little bursts of moments is maybe what he was trying to go
Mm.
for with the jazz.
Yeah.
So I guess I see that, but it's missing that structure that makes those bursts effective in jazz music, and this one just doesn't have that. So it's just kind of bursts out of the blue that don't lead anywhere. So
Yeah.
I appreciate, again, what I do appreciate is that this is not following any sort of conventional biopic structure. I do appreciate that to a degree, but there are also reasons that some of those structures have been effective.
Yeah.
And, so missing it entirely, both the biopic structure, coming of age structure, it's just kind of missing both of those things. And so it just kind of becomes this other amorphous thing that doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think this is a total travesty of film by any means.
Yeah.
It's, handsomely mounted, great production design, beautiful production design, and the cinematography, to our point, Christopher Blovelt, Kelly Reichardt's guy, is really just knows how to film period pieces like this. So there's that. And the acting elevates things quite well. It's just a shame about the structure.
Yeah, 100%.
Is how I feel by the end, Yeah. And Glenn, I would say, is innocent of any of those crimes that
Completely.
the film may have committed.
Yeah, it's really a script error. I guess you could lay the feet at Price as well. But yeah, everything else about the film is fine. It's forgettable work all around, but it's not bad work all around.
Exactly.
I encourage people to watch Peter Dinklage in The Lowdown, the great Ethan Hawke show. That's a show worth watching.
Okay. Fair point. Yes.
I was saving that joke in my back pocket. I don't know if I deployed it at the best moment, but I was ready. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
It works.
I worked hard
it's
on
fine.
it. Yeah.
And I suppose worth noting too, all these years later, that Glenn and Elle are in a movie this very year that we are recording this, in The Hunger Games, Sunrise on the Reaping.
You had to know, watching The Lowdown, that those two would reunite in The Hunger Games. It was inevitable.
It's just Lowdown. Drop the the.
I'm so sorry. I'm back on the FX show. Yeah, you're
right. Yeah, and for what it's worth, Peter Dinklage was in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So something's going on here. Yeah, with these people. Where's John Hawkes?
Yeah, it's your time to shine, Hawks. Cate Blanchett Jones. Yeah. He would actually be great in a Hunger Games something.
That would be a perfect fit, honestly. Yeah. Or you know what? Flea.
Flea. Come on, Flea.
Right? Yeah. Come on, Flea. Okay. So, unless you have any other things we didn't mention,
let me look through my notes.
Covered it.
Yeah, I mean, there were some interesting. Did you think your internet was freezing when those freeze frames dropped at the beginning?
Yes.
I was like,
I was like, oh no!
I reached for my remote. I was like, what's going on? And then Elle's voiceover started. So I thought that was. And then they do it again at the end. It wasn't as confusing at the end, but I thought that was a strange.
I did not care for that.
Yeah, strange choice. And it'd be one thing, they do that in like 70s or 70s style film, like deploy freeze frames throughout a thing, but it's really just the beginning and just the end and nowhere else in between. Yep. It was very random.
Yeah, which is also true of her narration as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
yeah, where was that? Yeah. Honestly, I feel like if there was, I'm not always the biggest fan of a ton of narration, but I feel like that could have helped flesh out some of the interior life of Amy Jo if they had deployed that more. We would have been able to connect with what she was feeling. Felt the same way.
Yeah, I know. I watched this on my library app, Hoopla.
Yep.
And I will say the quality of it was seems like it was below standard definition.
I don't like Hoopla for that exact reason. I used Canopy through my library, and I like the quality of Canopy a lot more than Hoopla.
Yes, sadly, I don't have access to Canopy.
Really, your library doesn't do that, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
No. What can I say? But yeah, watching it, I was like, oh boy, this looks like a VHS copy of this movie. But I was still able to appreciate some of the cinematography, even though it looked a little boxy. Yeah. I'll say that.
Yeah, I'm sure that didn't help.
Yeah. So I think we should get to the release of this movie. So Lowdown was first released at the Sundance Film Festival on January 19th, 2014. It did win a prize there for Best Cinematography.
Fair.
That was ultimately the last prize it would win. But it was acquired by Oscilloscope Laboratories and given a super limited release in late October of that year. It first debuted in one theater in New York on October 24th, and it ultimately peaked at a whopping 8 theaters.
Rough.
in its fourth weekend. So, I mean, it's really not even worth reporting on what other films were even out around that time, like I usually do at this portion of the show, because this movie was so far removed from any kind of box office discussion. And in total, Lowdown grossed a little over $52,000 in
Oof,
theaters.
that's
Yep,
rough. That's rough. Yeah,
not great, Bob.
it was interesting. I was reading some reviews of
Mm-hmm.
Lowdown. It was the same Sundance that Whiplash premiered in, which is kind of really
Yep.
interesting that both of those, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're very different movies, obviously, but it is interesting that both of these jazz-centric films premiered there. And I don't remember what
Yep.
Whiplash's release date was, but I'm sure it was probably October, November of that year. So
Yeah.
out around the same time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that they really that Whiplash like sucked the energy out of Lowdown by any means because the energy wasn't there to begin with. But it is just
I think Lowdown sucked the energy out of Lowdown.
fair.
Sorry. Yeah, it's just, it was not a thing. People didn't even really know it was a movie. As you know, we're both very tapped into these things, and I feel like neither of us really had a sense of what we were getting into at all. So,
Nope.
yeah, critics' reception was pretty mixed. General consensus was great atmosphere, the cast was great, but that the narrative was lacking, all of which we already said. And it did not win any end of the year awards. I don't think it was even campaigned as such. So, yes. Any thoughts on why we think the film was received with a bit of a shrug, ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you could really do otherwise. You know, I do wonder like if the film came out at Sundance now, would a different studio pick it up and do anything different with it? You know, would a Black Bear or A24 Neon? I just can't imagine that anybody would really do anything different with this film. I think it would just kind of come out on a streaming service and that would be that, really. It's the film
Yeah.
itself more than the release.
Yeah, and I just think it needed a stronger narrative hook ultimately,
Yeah.
and again, more balance to really kind of engage audiences. And honestly, even like looking at like something you could think about in terms of awards, which you kind of, sadly, it becomes a sort of default way that people talk about a lot of movies like this ultimately. But I think Glenn for me is like the only one I would even entertain as a potential nominee. Maybe John Hawkes too, but even that, like his performance can feel a little underbaked compared to what, the performance and character could have been with stronger material. Like I can see the germ of like a really great performance from John Hawkes there. It just doesn't really, I guess because of the structure of the film, it doesn't allow much interiority there, so it's
hmm
tough.
And it's not his movie, it's Amy Jo's movie. And
Yeah.
so, could he have done something in supporting actor or whatever? But it's
Mm,
ultimately, I mean, frankly, to the film's credit, it's not trying to be showy. It's not trying to
right.
be, which I appreciate that to a degree in the sense that it's more grounded than trying to be some showy awardsy thing. But also, maybe I would have enjoyed a showy, more awardsy thing a little bit
Yeah.
more.
At least one or two more scenes that are a little showier. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Doesn't
yeah,
need to be the whole
obviously
thing, but
Best Actress with Elle Fanning was never going to be a thing with a
never happening.
16-year-old,
No.
Even though I think she's quite good.
Yeah. Well, let's get to our last segment where we're going to rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. So, thinking about her performance and where this sits in her career, would you say that with this performance as Graham, she's ready for her close up, which is to say one of her best performances? Is it low Glenergy, not one of your favorites, not an essential one, close but no cigar, somewhere in the middle? Or we, of course, have our secret categories now, which are serving in silence, which is delivering a great supporting performance, or Gleniscent, meaning she's good, but the project not so much.
Yeah, I think Glennicent is the best category here because she really is good in the role. I mean, like I almost said low Glenergy, but that feels more insulting to her performance than Glennicent.
Yes.
She's good. She's good in this role. The film is just kind of nothing underneath her. So I think it's
Yeah.
totally fair to say she's good. The movie isn't.
Yeah. This is a Gleniscent for me through and through. Nearly a serving in silence, but I think she is single-handedly elevating this film at times and giving it the kind of specificity and, frankly, like, human emotion that is lacking for me elsewhere in the film often. And I'll just reiterate what I said in my Letterboxd review, which you may have seen, which is that from now on, I'm going to pretend that this was her grandmother character nomination that Glenn received instead of Hillbilly Elegy. That just sits better with my spirit.
Yeah, I was gonna say at first, wow, when Hillbilly Elegy came out, how did nobody compare it to this? Well, it's because nobody saw it. But they really are in the same space, taking up the same exact avenue.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have so much fun talking about that movie.
It's gonna be a journey. Yeah. Yeah, maybe what this movie needed was a good monologue about good Terminators, bad Terminators, and neutral.
Yes.
I think that's really what was missing here that prevented her from getting a nomination for Low Down.
That was the only thing preventing it. Yeah.
I think so. Yep. But Daniel, this was surprisingly a fun journey through this movie that doesn't really exist. So thank you so much.
Yes, I am glad to have gotten to see Low Down, know that it does exist.
You're welcome.
And to have the most in-depth conversation that has been had about this film since its release.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about a lot of movies on podcasts, but I feel like you'll never forget this discussion of Low Down.
Never.
So thank you for your time, and thank you for watching. And where can people find more of you on the internet?
You can find me on all the social places at HowatDK.
Yeah, simple enough.
There it is.
Very good. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. You could find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram. Just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. You can also listen to my Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race. That's And the Runner-Up Is on all platforms. You can also go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is for early access to those episodes and bonus episodes of And the Runner-Up Is, such as A Woman Robbed, my other series. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, follow the Glenn Pod, rate, review, and follow on all platforms. And with that, I'll bid you all adieu.